All right, really excited to talk to this person here on Tennis Channel Inside In. It's a long time coming. In 2009, she captivated the tennis world, especially for Americans. A lot of people know who this person is. Peaked at a career high of number 31, a couple titles, mixed doubles, and a singles title in Birmingham. But everyone remembers Wimbledon fourth round, US Open quarterfinals, and now doing great stuff after her career has ended on the playing court, still involved in the game. Melanie Oudin, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on. It's a long time coming, but welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, your story is one of perseverance, and you're one of the most exciting forces in tennis when a lot of people, certain generations, my generation came up, but I want to start from the beginning. I know there's a lot of backstory to your career, but growing up in Georgia, picking up a racket for the first time and really going all in, how was your tennis upbringing in the sense of finding the game and finding that not only you were good at it, but you were willing to put in the hard work and devote yourself to it?
So it's really funny because now I'm coaching, and back in the day, when I started, my grandma started my twin sister and I at just our neighborhood courts, and it was always my dream, even from a young age, to become a pro tennis player. I mean, I watched Venus and Serena when I was really, really young on TV playing at Wimbledon, the US Open, and I told my mom that I wanted to be there one day playing on those courts. And I really was one of those players, wasn't necessarily the most athletic or the most talented, but I really did work harder than everybody. And it really was, like you said, like perseverance and work ethic and all of that really played such a big part in my tennis career. And that's really what I think was really how I made it.
What do you think it is? Because this is like the fourth or fifth time I've talked, and we've started from the beginning, and it's always a grandma or grandpa. What's the grandparent influence on these professionals that end up making it?
Is it? That's so interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, people always ask me like, did your parents play? And I'm like, no, not
Yeah.
really. And no one in my family was ever like a pro athlete before, but it was really like my grandma, actually, she's still alive, and she's 91 years old now, and she played up until she was about 85, 86.
Wow.
And that's what I love about tennis, right? It's a
Mhm.
lifelong sport. And she just absolutely just loved the game, wanted us to get involved in it, which was, I thought, was so cool. So that's funny that you say that about,
Yeah.
Grammy. She loved to come to all the matches. She was my
Yeah.
first call when I made the fourth round of Wimbledon.
That's awesome. And yeah, if you have something to look forward to, something active, it's a great game for people of all ages, all levels. Your specific story too, and I know there's a lot of debate and discussion even nowadays about whether to go pro, go to college. If I have this right, you made the decision kind of consciously, like seventh grade, I'm going to go homeschool to chase that pro dream. So you were all in at a very young age, right, Melanie, to attack this pro dream and really make decisions that are pretty grown up at a young age.
Yes, I did. I actually was really lucky. I had a coach that made a deal with me. He wanted me to be successful on the pro tour because I feel like now there's a lot more opportunity to go to college and be
Mhm.
successful after. But when I was coming up, there wasn't a lot of that happening. And so I feel like it was a good decision to turn pro if you were going to be successful, if you could make
Yeah.
a living. So he said to me, Melanie, if you're ranked in the top 200 in the world by the time you're supposed to go to college, then
Mm.
you could like turn pro. If not, then I think you should go to college because I don't think that it's the right time. And so I was ranked in the top 200 by the time I was 16. And so that's
Mhm.
why I turned pro, because it was like setting me up for success. And I think like sometimes if you're set up that way, right? Like, and also it was a
Yeah.
great goal for me. I was like, I want to turn pro. I want to be ranked top 200. So, I had this like drive and I had this goal that really set me up for success in the pros.
Do you think you had gifts or developed game that made you ahead of the curve for your age? Was there something about your tennis that you think, because everybody is on a different path, we know that, but do you think early on you were a little ahead of the curve?
I think one thing that I did really, really well was my mental game.
Mm.
I was pretty mature for my age, and I didn't ever have to be pushed by
Mm.
my parents. I was also really lucky I had my parents as my parents and my coach as my coach,
Yeah.
which a lot of kids don't have. I've learned that a lot as I'm coaching nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think like that really helped me, was able to have like that separation between the two. But like
Hmm.
I definitely was like a force of nature, like for myself, like being able to like wake up in the morning at 6 a.m.
Right.
without anyone else having to wake me up, even when I was like 11 and 12, and like knowing I had to be at practice at this time or go running at this time.
Yeah.
I really wanted it like for myself, like it wasn't really someone else pushing me to get there.
It's a fascinating point. I know we're jumping a little bit ahead to the coaching side of things, but it's funny. Rafael Nadal just retires, and one of the quotes that stood out to me was, "He's not burned out with tennis. Like he still loves it, still has that fire." And that's such a unique and special thing, right? Is to have that inner drive and to find ways to challenge yourself and also still enjoy the day to day grind of being a tennis player.
No, it certainly is. I mean, he is the best example to me. I mean, for like any young player coming up, and for me too, like his work ethic, his determination, grit, 100% effort on like every single point, right? Like I feel like there's no better example than him.
I would completely agree. There's not much that needs to be said more than he is just a great example for anyone that wants to follow the mode of anything in athletics. In
Yep.
your specific case, you go pro at 16 and you have the ranking success, but you're going from junior tennis, you're going from playing against children to playing against grown women. What was
Mhm.
that culture shock life? Were you adjusted to it? Did you plan on kind of a growing pain period? What was that transition like from children to playing against the very best in the world?
Well, I will say like um I did a pretty good job of taking like step by step like in my tournament schedules, and um I played all the USTA tournaments, junior tournaments, and then as soon as I turned 13, I started playing ITF tournaments, so like the international tournaments, and I went to Australia and Europe and things like that when I was really young to get a taste of like how many good players were out there, to see like wow, there's so many good international players, not just in the US. And then as soon as I turned 14, I started playing pro tournaments. So I did like take advantage of like right when I was that certain age and able to
Mhm.
play. So I wasn't like, it wasn't like a shock the
Right.
second I, turned that certain age. I wasn't just playing, much older
Mhm.
players. The biggest difference for me wasn't necessarily the age, it was more of the mindset.
Mhm.
A lot of these older women, right? It wasn't like juniors, it's more of like your after school thing that you do,
Yeah.
right? It's more of like tennis is just, it's not necessarily, it's not fun, like you're doing it more than just for fun. But then when you're pros, right, it's your job.
Yeah.
So even though when I was only 14, 15, 16, I hadn't turned pro yet, it was like this is their job. Like it was more of like a,
Mm.
especially some of these international players, it was like whether they're going to have a hotel room to sleep in that night,
Mm.
and so it
Yeah.
was like not a life or death kind of thing winning the match, but it meant so much more to them to win that
Yeah.
match or to win that tournament.
We've come a long way in the sense of, providing opportunity for players on the way up. But there's still obviously room to grow and more progress to be made. But yeah, that's a great point. Like you start to put your livelihood on the line, it raises the stakes and changes the game. You mentioned a lot of good influences in your life. Did you have people that helped you with managing the schedule, with managing the grind, with telling you when to play, when not to play, when to recover? Did you have those influences of people that kind of held your hand along the way?
I did. I had a coach growing up that he really did help me like with the schedule, um, you know, balancing like what tournaments to play, when I needed breaks. I
Mhm.
probably did overtrain a little bit, but I felt like I was always that I needed reps. Um, and I had some good people behind me, like getting in touch with the right kind of people, good mentors,
Mhm.
and then good just peers, right? Like other players that I worked well with and I got to practice with and just were around. You want those type of people with you, um, especially when you start out on the
Right.
tour.
So a lot of this revolves around the year you were 17 and everything
Yeah.
really did come together and blew up and you became nationally and internationally recognized. Did you have any inkling before that summer, really before Wimbledon, before it all really came together and it was a whirlwind? Did you notice anything about your game that like, "Oh, I'm getting a little closer here, some things are starting to come together for me"?
So, so many people have asked me that because they're like, "Did that year, like, come out of nowhere? Like, how did
Yeah.
that happen?" So, I think it was I can't remember if it was the year before or it was either the fall before that or the it was either 2007 or 2008. I can't remember which fall it was, but I had a fall where I won, like, 27 matches in a
Mhm.
row. And that they're in the
Mhm.
junior, like, ITF circuit, and I got to 2 in the world
Yeah.
in the juniors, and that was where, like, things really clicked for me. Like, I really
Yeah.
wasn't ranked that high. I was ranked, I don't know, somewhere in the 50s or 60s ITF, and that was where, like, my game, I felt like, really came together. Like, all the work in developing my game, like, it just came together, and then I slowly, like, moving on to the pros, it took a little while, and then, like,
Mm.
obviously it clicked, but I didn't feel like it came out
Right.
of nowhere. I felt
Mhm.
like it slowly had been, like,
Mhm.
developing, but that big click in the juniors, I was, like, kinda
Mhm.
waiting for the big click in the pros.
Yeah, being used to win, right? Everything's kind of muscle memory, and you had experience winning matches and handling a
Mhm.
win streak. And then, maybe more importantly than that, Melanie, bouncing back and realizing you have to go back and compete
Right.
the next day. Because the Wimbledon run started it, you entered as a qualifier, you get
Yeah.
to the fourth round, you're playing on grass, which, by the way, was where you won your singles title. So I don't know if you realized it then or before that maybe grass could be my surface a little bit.
Mhm. Yes, I always loved grass. I think it did suit my game well. I mean, grass I feel like is one of those, like, fluke
Yeah.
surfaces sometimes. Like, you can play really, really well on it or you can play really badly on it. But for
Yeah.
me, like, I thought it was always fun to play on. So that's why I always enjoyed it.
You're someone that could speak to this too, because you mentioned the mental side of tennis and being able to handle it as a pro. You were able to handle the big environment, the holy grail of tennis at Wimbledon. What would your, I guess, advice or experiences tell you to kind of share with other young players that are trying not to get overwhelmed by the experience, by a big match, by playing multiple matches at Wimbledon? How are you able to handle that moment and continue to rack up those wins at tennis's holy grail?
I mean, it's definitely it's not easy, especially the first time. I mean, gosh, like the first round Wimbledon qualies, I was down 2 match points. So it's not like I really came through that and fought super, super hard. I could have been out first round qualies, it could have easily gone the other way and never made fourth round. But I think, like, enjoying the competition there, enjoying being in that
Yeah.
moment, I mean, that's what I've been training for, since I
Yeah.
was 9 years old, was to be able to compete in Wimbledon and be
Right.
there in that moment.
Is You said another thing that perked my ears a little bit. So down 2 points in qualies and 2 match points in qualies.
Yeah.
Is your experience, is your belief? Do you think that house money theory is true, where if you have a scare maybe early, then you're just riding the wave and it's almost like you can't lose in a way?
So it actually I do believe that because the next couple rounds in qualies, I actually played some of the best tennis I feel like I've ever played. It was almost like, yeah, I had nothing to lose after that.
I've heard it again. I'm keeping a diary of all the times I've heard similar stories where I almost lost first round and then I went all the way.
Yep.
Um, in that same regard, so Wimbledon ends in the fourth round. Previous to the U.S. Open, did you feel like maybe that you had earned some respect, that maybe the players on tour understood that you were on the way up in that time period where you'd made a fourth round of a slam, you started to have success? Do you think the locker room maybe looked at you a little differently?
Um, I think so. I think not a lot of people knew me by then. I mean, I was pretty new coming on the
Hmm.
tour, and I feel like they mostly will look at you when you have a big win, like when you beat someone. So I think
Hmm.
I had played Bammer was seeded.
Hmm.
So when you beat a seed, that's especially like something that's big. And then when I beat Yankovic, that was
Hmm.
definitely big because everyone knew who
Yeah.
Yelena was, right? So um and then getting to like the fourth round was obviously like much. I was in the second week, which was like a big, just like a qualifier, and the second week is
Right.
obviously like bigger in the tournament.
Certainly is. I've noticed it too in just watching and observing that you can have a top player, top man or woman, and they have confidence, right? They believe they're going to win every match, as they should. But there's a moment when they're tested by an unknown or someone on the way up where there's a look where they kind of, Melanie, kind of like acknowledge the threat, like, oh, this
Mhm.
is different. This guy or girl's bringing it today. So that's an observation I'm sure you've seen as well.
Yes, yes, definitely.
And then getting forward, I mean, you talk about your career, it leads to the US Open, getting the wild card, and I want to point that out too. The US does a great job taking care and providing opportunities for these American players. But when you receive a wild card to the US Open, coming off that success, did you feel any pressure in terms of, okay, I'm expected to do well now. Now it's time to live up to some hype?
So I will say, I'm gonna correct you on that. I actually didn't get
Okay.
a wild card for that
Okay.
US Open. And I feel, and it's funny because a lot of
Yeah.
people think that I did get a wild card that US Open, and I actually didn't. I was in on my own ranking. The
Wow.
year before, I did get
That
a
was it.
wild
Okay.
card. And I lost first round. So like I feel like I lost my opportunity, and I played another wild card from Australia. So it was like a
Mm,
huge opportunity to win. So that year I was in on my own actually,
mhm.
from like the success at Wimbledon and things like that. I think I was ranked like 80, 70 or 80, 90 in the world. So got in, and then obviously like I got a really tough draw. So it was like completely different than the year before, and played like I think it was Pavlyuchenkova, who was like
Yeah.
ranked right outside of being seeded. So
Uh-huh.
she could have, I think she was one or two away from being seeded. So I was like, wow, this
Yeah.
is crazy. My coach says to me, Melanie, if you want to win the US Open, you have to beat like 6 Russians and a Williams sister.
It's not easy work, but you definitely did it down here talking with Melanie Oudin on Tennis Channel Inside In at 2009 US Open run that you just started to allude to. Yeah, I'm going to read the names of the people that you defeated. Pavlyuchenkova, Dementavia, Sharapova, who'll be in the Hall of Fame this year, and Nadia Petrova. So just running through the Russians, as I believe Roger Federer's father pointed out, that there's just something about this girl. She's just taking out all the Russians. But it was fun to watch the crowd. And that's kind of where I wanted to start, Melanie. The crowd, who has a lot of Americans to choose from when the tournament starts, they just gravitated towards you. And I'm sure as an American on the court, that has to be the most uplifting experience in tennis.
Yes, that was. I mean, being an American playing at the U.S. Open, first of all, is an unreal feeling. And then my first time playing in Ash was the
Mhm.
second round match against Dementieva, and I got to warm up on it like earlier in the day, just for like a really short amount of time, and it was empty, right? And then when I went on for the match, that's when it was full. And there was something about like during the match, obviously like the crowd was behind me in that match, but then I didn't think against Sharapova they might be for me because I know they really like Maria. But then when they really like turned for me, I was really surprised, and like getting like a standing ovation. Like I mean that the feeling of that, like that atmosphere, like is something, a memory like I will never ever forget.
Yeah, it's got to be the most special feeling. And playing on Ash, right? And playing on any big court for the first time as a tennis player, how much different is that to actually get that stadium experience versus the outer courts, the smaller courts that you're going to be playing on when you first start out as a pro?
It's I mean, the whole US Open experience is really awesome, especially, like I said, as an American dreaming of playing there one day. But Ash itself is a special feeling. The court is so big itself, right behind the baseline. There's so much more space. And then looking up, I mean, it's one of the biggest courts in the world, right? So,
Hmm.
um, I mean, just like looking up, you just, especially when it's filled, seeing all those people, and then let alone them like cheering for you. It's really hard to explain. It's one of those moments that like you dream of
Yeah.
playing there, from when you're a little kid.
Beating Dementavia and Sharapova, especially at the time, back to back, was jaw dropping for a lot of people to watch. Were you just locked in completely? Were you? Is that a feeling of kind of getting like out of body experience? But was that a feeling of just riding the wave? How did you maintain your emotions and stay focused on the task at hand when a lot of players might have a letdown after any big win?
So all of those matches I lost the first set. So I obviously didn't expect that to happen or necessarily win those matches because I didn't exactly start off the way that I wanted to start off. It took me a while to get things going and figure them out. Um, but I will say, like, I mentally really truly like that US Open, I believed that I could win. Like I really like I knew that
Yeah.
my level was just as good as everyone else, and
Mhm.
I really thought that I could, any person I was against, I really thought that I could win the match. And I think that belief and like fight, and I knew that, I had a chance against anyone, and I really thought that, hopefully that I could get through any of the matches. I knew my fitness was there, my mental game was there.
When was the first time you realized that life was a little different, where you were being recognized? There was a little increase in your profile. When did that happen, and what
So
was it?
it was definitely it was very noticeable. It was right after I beat Sharapova. Like that was when it was like exactly right after I beat Sharapova. It was like that next day was my day off, right? And so I played her, and then the day off was the next day, and then I played again. But that day off in between the matches, it was like no one knew me the day before, and then everybody knew me the day after I
Yeah,
played her. And I was kind of thinking all there was only one match that changed everything, which I thought was so crazy. It was like, and to me, Dementieva was 4 in the world at the time, so
right.
to me that was actually a little bit of a bigger win. I also thought it was better tennis too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but Sharapova, because of her name, it was bigger, and everyone knew about that match.
It's like practice courts too. I'm imagining the first time might be like, what are all these people doing out here? And then it's like, oh, they're out here to see you because you're popular now.
Yeah, walking around New York City, like it was all that
Yeah.
also was crazy. It just
Hmm.
everything was different at the hotel, walking around the city, like everything was different just from that one match, that one day. Like, so that was just what was crazy to me.
It was a well-deserved reaction to somebody that captivated everybody in the United States at the U.S. Open. Then, and speaking of national pride, I know your tennis story involves a lot of known as at the time Fed Cup, now Billie Jean King Cup, but you were somebody that always answered the call to play in those events. And I'm assuming in your case, just always looked at it as a tremendous honor to represent your country and play with some of your American peers.
Yes, Fed Cup was really, it actually started my 2009 year, my great year
Mm,
that I had. I really loved playing for Mary Jo. We had a great team. And I was able to play in my very first Fed Cup, a couple singles matches, and um definitely some of my best memories, like playing charades with the team and just like hanging out with everyone. And but yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that I was able to play for like a few years, getting to play on the team and representing USA.
Everybody speaks highly about Mary Jo, and everybody else also says, I can't say all the stories. Like there's some stuff that's going to stay behind closed doors, that there should be, because there's a lot of camaraderie. Your generation of young professional American women did a great job, and I'm struck by, Melanie, the closeness of it. That there's real friendship that's developed. There's competitive rivalries for sure, but
Mhm.
your era is pretty close and well good friends, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, like being on the tennis
Mhm,
tour, right? Like you have to be competitive and we're
mhm,
playing each
mhm,
other. But I think that the Americans as a whole, right? Like I feel like for a while people were saying, "Oh, like
mhm,
there's no one coming up. Like who's going to be next after Serena and Venus?" And
mhm,
um, like for a little bit, like it was me. Like
mhm.
I was ranked right after Venus and Serena, and then it was Christina McHale, and
Yeah.
then we had like Coco Vandeweghe and Shelby Rogers, Allison Risk, and then it had Sloane Stevens, Madison Keys, and like Jessica Pegula, and everyone slowly started coming. I mean, it was like now we have so many, right? It's like it took a little bit of
Mhm,
time, and now it's like amazing, right? We have so many players, and now Coco Gauff and Daniel Collins. Like, I mean, there's just so many players. I'm forgetting a bunch, right? But
mhm.
um, American tennis is at an amazing place right now, right? And
Yeah,
Serena and Venus, right, led the way, right, for so
yeah,
many. But it took a little bit of time, and all those people that were saying, where are they? Where are they? I'm
yeah,
like, well, they're coming, right? And they're
yeah.
here now. But everyone was pushing each other.
Mhm,
Like just like you said, everyone's been pushing each other, and yes, there's a competitive thing to it, but everyone has been pushing each other in a way, and we've all been friendly,
mhm,
but it's been great. We've been peers and practicing
mhm.
together and wanting to bring more American players to the top.
Yeah, it took your generation, similar to the men's side of Americans, like the John Isner generation, to bridge the gap and really carry the flag, and then the next generation goes further. That's just how sports works, and a lot of times is you
Mhm.
work hard to set up the next generation. Well, on the unfortunate side, Melanie, the career didn't last as long as you would have hoped, and any of us would have hoped. When did you start to realize that your body wasn't feeling right and that it was, unfortunately, injuries taking its toll?
So, yes, unfortunately, I had I had a obviously a bad year, like the in 2011 in singles, but mixed doubles obviously was a good year. And then in 2012, I ended up doing well in singles again, like having a
Mhm.
good year, winning my first singles title on the tour. But then the end of the year in 2012 was when I had like my first like two surgeries. Um, and so I would say at the end of 2012 is when things like changed. Um, I had like, won't get into like all the
Mhm.
details, but basically like um a type of SVT like with my heart.
Mhm.
Um which I thought were panic attacks, but they actually weren't. I was diagnosed wrong, which was like a long story. And then I had like an eye surgery, but basically like in a rare muscle condition, a bunch of like weird little things that I've gone into detail before in like different interviews, but
Mhm.
a bunch of little things that like never quite like the heart thing's better, right? Everything's better, but I feel like my body never got back to like 100%. And being at the top of your game, being on the tour, right? You have to be at 100%. And so I felt like I never played a full season again. I never played at like my top level for like, months at a time, and trying to get back like mentally and physically over and over and over, like that was pretty exhausting. And I was one of those people that wanted to push. I had to push myself 100%, right? Like
Right.
that was how I got the most out of my game. And
Mhm.
that was what was like a little bit defeating for me. And so I knew it was time, like when I really couldn't do that.
Yeah, you were dealt some pretty bad hands there, from what I gather, and the amount of times you made the effort to come back was more than
Mhm.
most, because it's brutal. The sport is so competitive and so skilled that if you're, as you said, not at the top, not healthy, it's hard to really compete and give yourself a chance. But the love of the game, right, shone through. So it sounds like, you exhausted all your energies to make an effort to try to keep it going. When was enough enough? When was the time decided, okay, I gave it all I had. I think it's time to move on to the next phase of my life.
So 2016 was my last year playing. That's my I played like kind of on and off. I made to the finals of a couple like challengers. Um and again, like I had struggled with some injuries throughout the
Mhm.
year. And then um in 2017 I didn't play at all. Like I had a
Mhm.
hamstring injury, and I just kind of knew like that I didn't think I would be getting back, but I struggled with kind of knowing like, is this the right time? Like, is this not the right time? I've been a tennis player my whole life.
Mhm.
I'm like, what am I going to do now? This is all earlier than I planned on like retiring. Right, I was only 25, maybe I think 25 or 26. I think only 25. So people, nowadays are playing until their 30s, mid
Mhm.
30s. So I'm like, this is definitely earlier than like a lot
Mhm.
of my peers are playing into. Right, I'm much younger. So in August, I realized like it's time, and I actually felt relief when I announced it. That's how
Mhm.
I knew that it was definitely right for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like for athletes retiring, especially when your career's cut short. It's all you've known. It's all you devoted yourself
Mhm.
to. But still, and looking back at your career, do you focus, now that we've had some time to breathe, on the positives, on the fact that while it wasn't nearly as long as any of us would have liked, you made memories and created moments that a lot of players who play into their 30s would only dream of?
Yes, no, I mean, for me, like I don't have any regrets on like what I gave to the sport. Like, I mean, um how hard I worked, and I mean, there are a lot of things that are out of my control as far as like the injuries that I had.
Mhm.
I kind of wished I had like a shoulder injury or
Mhm.
like, something simple like that, but a lot of things were out of my control, and unfortunately, like that was just the hand I was dealt. But yeah, I mean, I try to focus on the positives,
Mhm.
like you said, and the memories that I made, and I definitely still like absolutely love the sport and want to continue in tennis.
We got more with Melanie Oudin here on Tennis Channel Inside In. That love of the game still shines bright after your playing career ended, becoming a high performance coach, and still being involved in the game. Why was working with the USTA the right move, and why did you want to help the next generation and really get into the coaching side of things?
So I really did not think that I would become a coach. I thought I had spent way too much time on the court, And I didn't think that I would love to do that after all of the years of training, be on court, 6,
And
7
being
hours
around
a day.
coaches too, probably also. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But I'd always been told from people like that I would be a good coach just for how much I loved watching matches, and I was such a student of the game.
Yeah.
I was very strategic and always worked, was like studying and looking at, tactics and strategy and outsmarting my opponent and things like that. Watching lots of film and all of that. So when I started coaching, which was like easy in the beginning, more like hitting and things like that, I
Mhm.
really, really started falling in love with it. And I've been really lucky to be around such great
Mhm.
coaches, especially with the USTA,
Mhm.
involved in a lot of these camps where, around like 8 coaches that are all extremely high level, and then going down to
Mhm.
Orlando and working with a lot of the national coaches. So a lot of them have been great mentors to me as well, tons of experience. So I feel like I've been just growing my coaching resume.
So I had a quote that I read about you, and I think it was from you, but it might be from somebody else. That's Coach Mel is like a different persona. How is that different from Melanie Oudin, the lovable player that captivated? How is Coach? I feel like it sounds like she might be a little more rugged and strict, but you can clear the air on that one.
Okay, so I will say that, like, personality wise, yes, like I'm still like known as being like bubbly and like
Yeah.
things like that. But on the court, I think like I'm known as being like, I someone called me rigid one time, and I was like, "Okay." But it was more about a nitpicky. I've been called
Uh-huh.
nitpicky and, like, definitely strict,
Yeah.
and I think it's because a lot of these players are like, I wanna be the best player I can be, or I wanna be pro, and I'm like, "Okay, like, this is how you can make it," like, and they think, like, I actually know what it takes to get
Mm.
there, right? And so I'm definitely not one of those coaches that's going to say, "You're doing great. Like, this is great. Like, you're playing awesome," and just
Yeah.
kind of like telling them what they want to hear. Right. I'm
Mhm.
actually want to help them and tell them,
Mm.
like, this is how you get there. Like, this needs to be worked
Mhm.
on. This needs to be worked on. Right. In a positive
Mhm.
way, but
Mhm.
like honest. Like,
Right. Rome wasn't built in a day, for lack of a better metaphor. So you're not going to achieve your dreams by just saying I'm the best, and one day you just win all these matches. So
yes,
yeah, it's just the two personalities is funny.
that's
It's like,
funny, but it's
are
true.
we are we gonna get Melanie Dan, or are we gonna get Coach Mel? But no, it makes a lot of sense. And having someone with your experience too, I know is a tremendous resource. Again, the generations of players that had success that are now giving back is just great to see. And also the motivational speaking too. I know you've given some speeches, you've told your story. Were you someone that was open before to public speaking, or did you grow into that role as well?
I was open to it before. I did a decent amount of that when I was still playing, but I've done more of it since I stopped playing. I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of like done some for like some colleges and high schools
Hmm.
and things like that. But it's really fun for me because, I am so passionate about like growing this next generation and, sharing all the knowledge, that I've learned over the years. Because I really went through like all of this
Hmm.
same stuff that all of these young players are trying to do.
Yeah, having that valuable experience and knowing good and bad times too. You had you have different levels of experiences that you can share on the good and the bad front. So I think it's, again, just a valuable resource. And as we wind this down, Melanie, it's been a blast to chat with you. I want to know, one of the last things, what have you discovered since retiring? Maybe hobbies, passions, something maybe you learned about yourself that you enjoy doing now that you have a little more time on your hands, I'll say.
So, well, I'm definitely coaching a lot.
Hmm.
I actually miss traveling some.
Hmm.
Um, I will say it's been really fun to have some friends outside of tennis. That's been a really big
Hmm.
part of my life that like I needed to kind of get away from the tennis part a little bit and kind of see like like grow into, have some friend groups that I don't talk tennis at all.
Hmm.
And that's actually been a very refreshing part of like leaving the tour and making friends that there's zero tennis talk at all, and with
Yeah.
friendships where like that's not even, we don't even talk about my whole tennis life from before, which is like really refreshing. And then there's obviously parts where, I obviously don't want to leave that part of me behind, but because I'm not on the tour anymore, right? It's almost like a past life where like I still remember, but it's, it's very much like it is in the past now. I'm moving forward. So that part's been really cool.
And I'm sure it took you some time to kind of unprogram from looking at a calendar like a tennis calendar. Like months just equate to tournaments and countries and everything. Well, this has been a blast, Melanie Oudin. The last thing I have for you is it sounds like you're committed to tennis, still very much in love with the game, and we should be used to seeing you indefinitely, dare I say, a tennis lifer.
I mean, I think so. I mean, I'm not planning on going anywhere. I definitely hope to be in coaching roles. I'm not sure exactly what capacity for the long term, but for right now, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, working with USTA and then coaching in Atlanta also. So I'm sure you'll see me around in the future.
Well, we love to see it. That's Melanie Oudin, 2009 U.S. Open quarterfinalist, number 31 in the world. Coach Mel, as she's known to her kids. So good luck to those kids very much. Stay in it. But Melanie, always a pleasure to talk to cool and exciting people who made their mark on the game, and you're no exception to that. So thank you, Melanie Oudin, for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In. All the best, and I hope to chat again in the future.
Thank you so much.